Trigun returning has been one of the most promising announcements I've ever seen as a fan of anime. Coming from the era of Cowboy Bebop and Evangelion, the adventures of Vash the Stampede always felt overshadowed to me despite their still popularity. And there is reason for that. The original Trigun is a masterful story, but it's an adaptation that strayed from its source, leading to some more obvious flaws. The final villain is underutilized, and a few critical details are woefully underexplained, although you could say the same for Eva. With the other giants of the era are still celebrated for their animation, updated on streaming sites with 1080p resolution, Trigun isn't because it just didn't hold up as well, and now it remains in a hell of 480p. I think Trigun is more reliant on needing to get to the story than others. Bebop's mishmash of adventures and joyfully lonely mood make it perfectly enjoyable across any reason, and although Eva is depressing as hell, it has the constant hook of giant robot fights to pull anyone who is lost back in, and even if they end up hating the series, that just kind of fuels the almost 3 decades long flames. Trigun, though, takes a more slow, winding, and cautious path without those kinds of obvious hooks. At first glance, I wasn't invested in the series at all. I thought, oh look, another happy-go-lucky anime protagonist who somehow's their way out of every situation and refuses to kill because he's just too good. It felt like it was going to be generic the anime. But with each new adventure, a bit more of that facade is peeled away, revealing that Vash the Stampede is no natural bundle of joy who's protected by the powers of a story. He's not some normal guy who we're supposed to all be. He's special, and he only survives because he is special. His trick is making it look any other way. As we witness this shift, the anime is essentially making a counterpoint to the very character Vash appears to be. We see not just that he only survives because he is special, that even in being special, he suffers to achieve this goal. His body is covered in scars and patched together with metal. He leaves every town behind because of the disaster his birthright has caused, and so he's alone. Almost everyone in the world wants him dead, including the phantoms of his past who seek to torture him. With Wolfwood's help, it becomes a story about the cost of idealism, about the idea of a better way, ending with a man who has steeled himself to push through the suffering of the world he was dropped into and loves it anyway, despite its toll. This shift, along with its more rough animation, is why I think it's an anime that shines more in a deep understanding of the story. I really wanted it to get a simple update, just make it look better and release it to a new generation to understand and appreciate this amazing story. I'd always considered making a video to plead this case, and luckily I don't have to anymore. We got the reveal of a new series and the trailer, and it's not what I would have said I wanted at all. I don't feel strongly about the CG. I understand the preference for 2D, but I think anyone refusing the new series on CG alone is engaging in pointless elitism because it looks downright gorgeous. The Vash redesign is unexpected, but every design is a product of its time. For example, Spike was made to look uncool, but because of him, we'd likely now call that look cool. So I'm not upset about an update to the design, and a simple look at it almost seems to fit with Vash's personality. If they get the character right, I don't care how he looks. And then there's a lot of background details that give me hope too. The town built onto the cliffside seems on point with the feel of this hardly surviving wasteland. The clothes they wear seem similar to those in the original. This blocky pistol screams 90s to me, and the guy holding it has that same adapted Western feel. I'm super hopeful about how it all looks and feels. Now, a lot of people have been pointing out that it seems to be an earlier point in the story. Vash appears younger, they really focused on his childhood and the idea of brothers, the bounty is lower, and Meryl and Millie were absent. I think the idea that this is an earlier point in the story is quite fair. Now, it is a short trailer, so this could be some selective bits hiding the true nature of the story, but let's work under the assumption that it is an earlier point in the story. Meryl and Millie are out. Wolfwood mostly is too, although a younger version of him with the gung-ho guns could technically be included, although it wouldn't really factor into Vash's story, so it probably won't be. And Vash is left in a situation where the entire point of his character, learning the cost of idealism, has to be saved for later, or else the original and this new series would fail to mesh. From everything I've said, this could be a disaster. But I think we have to really look at the whole arc of Vash's development to understand why it won't be. His tragedy in the original is watching the happy-go-lucky front slip away to reveal the tortured soul underneath. It's painful. We see him purposefully suffer for the good of others while there's a bounty on his head. He's hunted at every turn despite his good deeds. Watching someone fake to be so happy as Wolfwood calls him out for in their first meeting is heartbreaking. The best starting point for Vash's character is that of the generic protagonist, so he can then fall from there. But knowing he has to take a different arc anyway, we can shift that starting point to something almost more tragic. How did he start to fake such happiness in the first place? Why did he feel it was necessary? This is a man whose entire life with everyone he's loved has just been torn apart, ripped away before his very eyes as he's dropped to a harsh wasteland with no one but his psychotic brother who caused the whole event. Everyone and everything he knows is dead and destroyed. His only connection wants to use him as a tool of destruction. The lessons his mentor taught him could never have appeared more false. He is broken. How does he get from this state to how he appears at the start of the original? I think the potential for this story is downright insane and could serve as the perfect pairing to the original. I imagine a young Vash, disillusioned with the world, drifting into one of the awful towns of this desolate wasteland because there's no other option. He's alone and doesn't care because why should he? There's monsters everywhere, people and creatures alike. Maybe he sees that what he witnessed from knives wasn't something alien, but something innately human too, this torturous desire. People are stolen from, kidnapped, robbed, and killed. But in it all, life continues. Parents are still raising children, the cook around the corner is still making delicious meals every day, new houses are being built on the other corner, and across the city they're working to fix that old plant to power the city. These people want better despite everything awful. For someone who isn't human, would this all make sense? I think it stands to reason that this is something Vash would have to come to understand. I want to know how he came to reconcile Rem's words with such a harsh world, how he came to love something so flawed. Watching the veneer of happiness fall is something, but isn't it more tragic that it had to be put up to begin with? Imagine the moment of Vash's first fake smile, the admission that everything is horrible, but there is no choice but to continue on anyway. That to follow the words of the one he loved most, he has to be something that this world would chew up, spit out, and destroy in its entirety, knowing he only survives because he is something more than humans. To see the guilt of this building provided the reason why he allows himself to be tortured so and still smile. Imagine the moment when he destroys July, when all of this is tested to the extremes, when he's broken down once again, and he resigns himself that he can't even keep the company of the humans he grows to love so much, or else they'd constantly be in danger. There's so much in the starting point of Vash's character that could be explored in interesting ways through an earlier take. Now, this doesn't wipe away every concern. I think that Meryl, Millie, and Wolfwood are essential to the original story as contrasts that help test and develop Vash and his ideals. Technically, an earlier take wouldn't require the roles they filled, but thematic coherence alone doesn't make a good story. Wolfwood was an engaging and interesting personality on his own. Meryl and Millie were a classic straight-laced and wacky duo to keep things lighter when needed, and Legato was the opposite end, thrusting the series back into darkness. Even if they're not all needed, they'd be severely missed. It might not feel like Trigun without them. While the idea of hope that's core to the original could be maintained in everything I theorized, a series isn't what it represents alone, it's how it got there, the bonds we build with it and its characters that they build with each other, and what we see of ourselves in them, and a lot more because, well, humans are really complicated, and so are the stories we tell. Trigun Stampede won't be perfect, but neither was the original. So let them take some risk, let them change it a bit with the times, and let's see what comes from it. I'm hopeful as hell for Trigun Stampede.